everybody. Welcome back in another episode, Guerrilla Sports Daily, kicking off our Wednesday morning, June 19th. Second day in a row, a little bit cloudy, a little bit windy here in the Mile High City. But hey, that's all right. We've had a few hot days strung together here. We are heading to Vegas next week, and I looked up the weather for next week in Vegas. You know it's going to be nice. It's summer in Vegas. You know it's going to be hot. But I wanted to see just how hot. How hot was it going to be next week when we were going to Vegas for the NHL draft at the Sphere, which I'm super looking forward to. We're going to be out there Wednesday through Saturday. 112 Wednesday, 112 Thursday, 110 Friday, 109 Saturday. It's going to be hot. You guys know I'm a warm weather guy. I love it. So I'm looking forward to that for the most part. 112 is a little bit ridiculous. So point being, we'll take a day or two here in Colorado that's a little bit cloudy, a little bit windy. Let's get into it today, guys. More updates coming. The Edmonton Oilers keep the NHL season alive. Not just their own season. The NHL season lives for one more day as they finally break away from the NBA script. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about an interesting conversation I heard coming in. It was a conversation back and forth about Shedeur Sanders that kind of led me to another thought. We're going to get into that as well, plus some fun stuff that we saw floating around the Twitterverse. But I do have to start off the show by mentioning Willie Mays, legendary outfielder, played in the MLB for over 20 years, over 3,000 games. Passes away yesterday at the age of 93. This is always the tough part of covering sports, working around sports. These are icons that you get to know, not that you get to know necessarily personally, but that you follow. 24-time All-Star, 12-time Golden Glover, 2-time MVP, World Series champion, and a Hall of Famer. Like I said, over 3,000 games played. Sad day in the sports world, in the world of baseball. Willie Mays passes away at the age of 93. Our thoughts go out to him, his family, his friends, and everyone involved there with the MLB. Lost a true legend and an icon of the sport. Willie Mays passes away at age 93. Let's get into what we were talking about a little bit here. Yesterday, the Edmonton Oilers are able to extend the Stanley Cup final and the NHL season, finally breaking away. If you tuned in on Monday, we were joking, laughing that the NHL and the NBA Finals had really been following the exact same script. One team really dominant through 3 games, looking like they were just in a different class than their opponent, both with the Boston Celtics versus the Dallas Mavericks and the Florida Panthers versus the Edmonton Oilers. The script stayed the same in Game 4 as the Dallas Mavericks and Edmonton Oilers not only pushed back, but won in dominant fashion. Boston Celtics, as we discussed yesterday, win their 18th NBA championship just a couple nights ago. They're hanging that banner. They've been celebrating now for a couple days. We were wondering, would the script stay the same? Would the Florida Panthers be able to close out on home ice? I mentioned it also yesterday. Matthew Tkachuk and Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics, great friends, childhood friends. Were they going to be able to close out on back-to-back nights? It was a fun, entertaining game last night. The Edmonton Oilers do end up winning 5-3 with an empty netter. Had 2 separate 3-goal leads, led the game 3-0 and then 4-1. But the Florida Panthers were able to battle back, make it a game at least there. Matthew Tkachuk with a heroic effort to try to stop an empty netter. But Connor McDavid, his second consecutive 4-point game. He's the first player in NHL history to record back-to-back 4-point games in the Stanley Cup final. Here when facing elimination, Connor McDavid is taking his play to another level. I want to circle back on McDavid and maybe a little bit of a broader topic on MVPs in the playoffs and potential criteria for that. I want to circle back. But let's talk about this game a little bit. I said it before the Boston Celtics Game 5, the NBA Finals Game 5. I said, look, a game where you're blown out the way the Celtics and the Panthers were in their respective games, Game 4s, I said that's kind of an easy game to bounce back from. Or maybe not bounce back from, but to wipe clean. Hey, that was clearly not our game. Clearly nothing went well. Everything went right for them. Wipe the slate. We're starting over. especially here in the playoffs. Doesn't matter if you win 1-0 or if you lose 1-0 or 10-1. Doesn't matter. A loss is a loss. It still only counts as one win for the other team. Easy to bounce back from that and wipe the slate clean after kind of getting your butt kicked. The game that we saw play out last night, that's a game to me. And look, this is a veteran Florida Panthers team. We talked about it. I kept the parallels going all week. The Boston Celtics, they had been knocking on the door. It kind of felt like they weren't going to be denied. Florida Panthers, they've been knocking on the door. Second straight trip to the Stanley Cup final. This is now the third straight year where they've been a no-doubt contender. President's Trophy 2 years ago, Stanley Cup final last year, Stanley Cup final this year. They're a veteran team. I'm not saying that there's panic in that room, but that is a game last night that can cast a little bit of doubt. The Edmonton Oilers were able to edge you out in play. In a tight game, they were able to find a way to hold on to win. Now, if you watched that game last night, the way that it played out maybe felt a little bit similar to what we saw in the NBA Finals for Game 5, where in the back half of that game, the Florida Panthers really kind of took over. And it was everything that the Edmonton Oilers could do just to be able to hold on. And I felt that was what the Boston Celtics did to the Dallas Mavericks a couple nights ago. Really just kind of put their foot on the gas and kind of pulled away late, took over the play. The difference was the Florida Panthers last night couldn't get anything to go in the Stanley Cup Finals. Couldn't ever really make great use of their opportunities, and specifically without getting too far into the weeds, the Edmonton Oilers are on a historic run with their penalty kill right now. Last night, the story of that game was absolutely special teams. The Florida Panthers give up a shorthanded goal and a power play goal against and aren't able to get anything going on the man advantage themselves. That was the story of last night. That is why this series is taking the 6-hour flight, the furthest ever two cities have ever been apart in the Stanley Cup final. 6-hour flight back to Edmonton for Game 6. We're going to see what happens here on Friday. The league is giving the teams 2 days off in between each game because the travel has never been further in the Stanley Cup final. 6 hours in between Sunrise, Florida, and Edmonton, Alberta. The teams are on their way back today. I said I wanted to circle back to Connor McDavid. The performance that we've seen him put on in these last two games, I didn't feel like, I heard people talking about that the Florida Panthers had a lot of pressure to win last night, to not let this series go back to Edmonton. I think I disagree. You're still up 3-2 in the series. Edmonton is still having to try to battle back in this series. Now, obviously, there's pressure to close it out here in Game 6. You don't want to go back to your own building for a Game 7. You don't want to give the Edmonton Oilers that kind of shot of life. But the performance that Connor McDavid has put on in the last two games, I think has kind of manufactured some pressure because, look, I give the Edmonton Oilers a lot of credit for bouncing back here. If you've been tuning into our shows here for the last week during this Stanley Cup final, I was very critical of them after 3 games. It felt like there was no battle in what they were doing. And again, not to keep repeating myself, but it just felt so similar to what we were seeing in the NBA. Just really, it looked like the Edmonton Oilers didn't have a chance. And Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl had been all but completely shut down, kept off the score sheet. And now Connor McDavid, 8 points in the last 2 games. He is now making you start to wonder. One of my criticisms against the Edmonton Oilers when all of the Stanley Cup Finals started was, can they really do this with just 2 players really driving the boat? Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. 13 consecutive playoff losses for the Edmonton Oilers when Leon Draisaitl does not record a point. They are very reliant on the production of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl to win games in the playoffs. I said, can they do it? Connor McDavid is showing that there's a chance one player might be able to not only drag you back into a series, their odds have gone up to 23% based on analytic models to win this series. So it begs the question, does your team have to win? Does your team have to win the championship for you to win MVP, playoff MVP? J.S. Jaguar doing it in the early 2000s is the last one that happened that we've seen in the NHL. I don't remember any others, and I'm going to look it up. Losing team MVPs, championships, losing team playoff MVPs. Because I just don't think it's so hard, because I am someone who thinks that when you're talking about regular season awards, there are criteria. Heck, the NBA even just instituted a minimum games played requirement. There's now very real criteria to win the MVP in the NBA. But I look at, and I think this is true across any sport, I think you need to have made the playoffs. I think you need to get your team to the postseason to be in the conversation for regular season MVP. Jerry West, the late Jerry West, the first awardee in 1969, the only player in the NBA to win the MVP while on the losing team. And like I said, J.S. Jaguar is the only one that I can think of. You'd have to go back to the 70s. Reggie Leach to find another NHL player that was on the losing side of the Stanley Cup final that won the MVP. Connor McDavid's making a case. What do you guys think? I don't know. Like, can you have a performance that's special? Connor McDavid has already set the NHL record for most assists in 1 point season. I believe he's 7 points shy of the all-time points record for the NHL postseason. It's an interesting conversation, because your mind does immediately go to, okay, well, who was the most valuable player on the winning team? But with what we're seeing Connor McDavid doing, and again, this is me eating a little bit of crow here, given the way that the first part of this series played out, the way that I was kind of looking at this series. Is it possible that Connor McDavid could have a special enough run here that even if, let's say it ends on Friday, and they come up short 4-2, they don't even push it to a game 7. What Connor McDavid has been able to do here over the last 2 games to make this a series. It looked like we were going to have, between the Stanley Cup Finals and the NBA Finals, 2 absolute duds of a series. To quote our girl Liv Moods here, she talked about this a lot during the NBA Finals. That was a boring NBA Finals. Even the one game that the Mavs won, it was a blowout. There really wasn't an entertaining game in the finals. That game last night that we got between the Panthers and the Oilers was potentially the most entertaining game of the Stanley Cup playoffs in what had been an otherwise boring series. And so much of that is because of Connor McDavid and what he's doing. Let's say this ends 4-2. I'm probably still giving that Conn Smythe, that playoff MVP, to a guy like Sergei Bobrovsky, netminder for the Florida Panthers. But I got to tell you, Connor McDavid has made this an interesting conversation. And when I looked last night, he was still, what was it, plus 450, I think, for playoff MVP. Still some good odds on Connor McDavid. And the way that this series is trending, I don't think that that's a bad play. With what Connor McDavid has been able to do in the last 2 games. And now look, I don't want to discount completely the fact that for 3 games, the Florida Panthers completely bottled him up. It's 2 games. We got to see what happens. But he is absolutely making a case for a losing team MVP, which we just do not see very often. Like I said, 1969, you'd have to go back to for the NBA. NHL, I believe it was 2004, J.S. Jaguar won as a losing member of the Anaheim Ducks. And before that, you have to go back to the 70s to find it for the NHL. Interesting conversation, no doubt about it. And Connor McDavid is making it interesting. Trying to see if I can find a quick futures here for Conn Smythe. Doesn't matter. We'll look at it. See, look, right as I said that, I found it. Wow. As I'm talking about this, last night before the game, Connor McDavid was not the favorite to win the Conn Smythe. Wake up this morning, Connor McDavid, -160, the odds-on favorite for the Conn Smythe. So everything I was just talking about, forget thinking if we think he should, do you think he can? He is the odds-on favorite to win the Conn Smythe as of right now, June 19th. 9:46 a.m. Mountain Time. All right, guys, let's move on. Connor McDavid, odds-on favorite to win the playoff MVP despite being down 3-2 in that series. All right, I mentioned it off the top. There was a conversation that I overheard coming in about Shedeur Sanders, heard it on the radio, and they were just talking about, hey, does this guy, is he really a first-round draft pick? I think maybe there was a listener question that had come in. Would he really be considered a first-round pick guy if it wasn't for his last name, et cetera, et cetera? And they were kind of arguing back and forth in that. I don't want to argue about is Shedeur Sanders a first-round pick caliber quarterback. Let's maybe let this season play out. Let's let his draft year play out before we start. Let's let it start at least, before we start getting too far into can he go first? Can he go this? Can he go that? Ron Hextall, 1987, a potential losing playoff MVP. I didn't see that one, but I will go back and look. You're probably right. I'm not going to get into Shedeur Sanders specifically, but it raised an interesting question for me. As I started to sit there and think back over my time covering, let's say, the NHL even, and then when you look at what is happening this year in the NBA, where the Atlanta Hawks are considering 3 different players at 1 overall, still doing team workouts with them. And then I think about the fact that Caleb Williams this past year in the NFL was really kind of considered the entire college season. He was the first overall pick. Could other players unseat him from that? And it started to make me wonder just how much of a player's draft stock is somewhat predetermined. Yes, of course, there are amateur scouts and you have late risers and late fallers, and every team does their board and things like that. But how much of it is you're expecting a guy to be a first-round pick type of player in whatever the league is? You're expecting that he's going to look far ahead of his peers. It's confirmation bias. How much confirmation bias exists in the world of scouting and amateur scouting as we head into these drafts? This player's supposed to be a first-round pick, so you're going to look at him like that. As we're, on the NBA side, the Atlanta Hawks, not only are they considering 3 different players at 1 overall, there's even rumors out there that they're willing to listen on trades, to trade back. What is the first overall pick worth to another team? The Atlanta Thrashers shopping it out. And so that tells you that, all right, there's going to be a little bit of a roundabout. So let's go back to 2017. Cale Makar, Colorado Avalanche defenseman, was drafted 4th overall. There was a lot of people who were scared off of Cale Makar, because of the league that he came from, the Alberta Junior League. It's kind of considered a junior A league. Not really considered one of the top leagues. So there was a lot of scouts, a lot of teams that kind of said, well, he's good, but if he didn't play in the top leagues, well, how good can he be? He falls to 4th. That draft is actually really the last time I can think of that there wasn't a consensus 1 overall in the NHL. Every other year, you kind of go into the draft, you're saying, this is going to be the guy. This is the next first overall pick. Then it just seems like every year in the NHL, as we have the consensus 1 overall pick, you just kind of watch him at each of the checkpoints, whether it be college or if he's playing major junior, and you say, yep, all right, he's following along all the same trends the 1 overall pick would be. They go to World Juniors, okay, yep, great. Following the same trend in a 1 overall pick would. And let's use the example of Shedeur Sanders on the football side of that. Here's a first-round quarterback. Every time he gets a start, every great play that he makes, every time he scrambles out of the pocket and is able to improvise and extend a play, go off script, breaks loose for a run. See, look at that first-round talent. And the argument that was being made this morning on the radio was put his numbers, whether it be straight wins and losses or even a lot of the more meticulous stat-keeping numbers. Sorry, I couldn't find the word stat-keeping. He doesn't really stack up to a lot of first-round picks. And again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of Shedeur Sanders. That was the argument. So again, do the numbers say that he's a first-round pick, or are we all saying that as far as expectations go? Macklin Celebrini is expected to be the first overall pick in the NHL this year. The San Jose Sharks, who own that first overall pick, have outright said, we're really excited to have Macklin in our group. They're not even hiding it. He is going to be the first overall. Now, look, I'm not saying that there's another player out there that deserves to go 1 overall over Macklin Celebrini. But I've been hearing this now for 2 years. How much is it that this is the hype around Macklin Celebrini? How much is Macklin Celebrini the true best player in this draft? And obviously, guys, I'm using him as the example. Macklin Celebrini could end up being the next best, the next Connor McDavid. I'm just using him as the example because he's been the guy for multiple seasons now that you knew was going to go after Connor Bedard. Connor Bedard. I've been hearing about Connor Bedard since he was 12. He finally gets drafted last year, 6 years later. How much of that is time and money and resources being put into Connor Bedard because you expected him to be there? I just find it funny that we typically don't see pick the sport. A late riser, the way that I kind of described Cale Makar, where in the months leading up went from, hey, this kid is maybe better than we thought. I feel like that is extremely rare. I feel like a lot of these drafts, especially at the top, right? Once you start getting into the later rounds, late part of the first round, yes, there's always going to be variation. There's always going to be teams that go off the board. But it was just such a funny conversation because there were people this morning arguing about whether Shedeur Sanders was a first-round caliber player or not, and we still have his entire draft year to play out. It is just the way that the news cycle and the way that we kind of overanalyze and pick things apart at times in the media, I think has kind of led to this weird, we're drafting players before they've even played. It's made for a really interesting thought process in my head this morning as we're weeks away from the NBA draft. We are a week away from the NHL draft, and there's all this talk about Shedeur Sanders going into next year's draft in the NFL. Hasn't even played this season. It is just so funny how much of pro sports does kind of become the club. And once you're in the club, it's easier to get more airtime. It's easier to get people to talk about you. And you're a much more high-profile player suddenly. Maybe getting a little bit of extra resources, maybe getting a little bit of extra love that help boost that draft stock. All right, guys, we're going to wind the show down today with a couple of just things I'm going to fly through a little bit quickly. Video emerged of Luka Doncic saying some unsavory things about a fan's mother who was sitting in the first couple of rows after that fan was chirping at Luka a bit, to the point, the fan was chirping at Luka to the point where someone felt it necessary to pull out their phone and film the interaction. And then when Luka snaps back at the fan, it's, whoa, you can hear it in the video. Whoa, hey, whoa, hey, what are you doing? Why are you chirping back at him? Why are you saying that? I feel different things about this. And what's so funny is I feel like we see it in the NBA. I guess it's not funny. We see it in the NBA more than anything else, more than any of the other sports. And I think that's a product of how close fans get to the action. And the NHL, there's glass, there's the barrier, that's thick glass, it's hard to hear through. There really isn't that barrier that separates fans from players in the NBA. And really, that's different than any of the other sports. There's at least like a partition, a half wall that separates the fans from the players. And so you have this incident with Luka Doncic. And to be perfectly honest, this is one where I think, hey, if you're a fan and you're going to be chirping back, if a player's going to turn around and chirp something at you, just chirp something back at you. That kind of comes with the territory, right? That comes with the ticket. If you're going to be close enough to say something to a player, you can't be completely shocked if they turn around and clap something back at you. I actually thought it was funny that everyone in the video was, oh, whoa. Oh, hey, you can't say that. It's like, so what? You as a fan have a free pass to say whatever you want to a player, but they can't say anything to you. So this particular instance, I don't really see an issue with it. There are two other instances that come to mind for me in the NBA that I do have an issue with. Patrick Beverley, earlier this season, 2 times threw a ball at a fan because of something that they were saying to him. And now look, I don't think I'm by no means, again, advocating for say whatever you want to players because you bought a ticket. But when the players start crossing the line over, now they're getting physical with fans, that's where I draw the line. It also calls to mind Russell Westbrook. I believe it was 3 seasons ago, follows a fan for the Phoenix Suns into a VIP lounge that's down underneath the bleachers, but still courtside, follows a fan in there and confronts him and the fan's small child about something that the dad was saying. That is the type of stuff for me. Look, I'll repeat it. I'll say it once again. I do not think because you bought a ticket, you have a free pass to say whatever you want to players. But there also is a certain level of, if you are a player, you have to know that you are going to be heckled at times by fans. Crossing the line and getting physical with fans, not only do I think is incredibly dumb and just it's dumb, it's dangerous, and it's a way to get yourself fined. It's a way to get yourself as an athlete hurt, put yourself in a situation with a fan that maybe is just crazy enough to snap off at you and swing off and hit you. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't like when I see players do that. And again, I'm fine with the Luka thing here. Has a small verbal exchange with a fan. That's the end of it. I don't like it when you see stuff like Patrick Beverley throwing a ball at a fan. I don't like where you see Russell Westbrook following fans off the court to confront them. If you're going to exchange some words, exchange some words. I'm not I'm not playing the Luka video. You can go find it. He, like you said, some unsavory things about a fan's mom. Last thing we're going to wrap up with today, Nikola Jokic, a video surfaced of him in Serbia playing alongside some other local Serbians. Cool video here. Cool to see. One that, he's back there and working out in a way that you would expect Nikola Jokic to be working out, working on his game in the offseason. But this is just one of those things where it's like, this is, to me, what makes him different than so many other players that not only you see in the NBA, but that you see in pro sports in general. Just fine being out there, having fun. And, he looks like he's out there getting after it a bit. He doesn't look like I'm sure he's not going 100%, right? But out there having fun, running plays with these guys. And there's actually a player, one of the guys on his team here in a bit, that kind of looks him off on a pass that made me laugh. But like I said, only Nikola Jokic would you see out doing stuff like this with just folks around Serbia. Not many other players in the NBA or, like I said, really any league. You always see the NFL videos come out in the summer of players getting in their workouts on the beach and stuff like that. But they've usually got a team of trainers and a team of nutritionists and all that stuff around them. This is just Jokic out with a bunch of, I don't even know if it's necessarily buddies, but there's about a bunch of Serbians out playing ball. It's awesome to see Nikola Jokic. Fans of Denver, lucky to have him. I think that's it for this morning, folks. June 19th, it's Wednesday. We're about to start the day. That's it. That's what I got from yesterday. The NHL season lives on. We're a week from the draft. This NHL season is going to bump right up against the draft. Fun time of year. They're not going to give us any downtime, but hey, for shows like this, we love it. Love talking to you guys more about all this. Continue to tune in every single morning, 9:30, Guerrilla Sports Daily. Got Jason running the board today. For Jason, I'm Jesse Montano. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.